Hi, welcome to the United Panther Movement Book Club. Today we are reading Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon, and we are on chapter 4 on national culture. Comrade Gabby, you have the floor.
Thank you, Comrade Zen. I will begin reading on national culture. It is not enough to write a revolutionary hymn to be a part of the African Revolution. One has to join with the people to make this revolution. Make it with the people, and the hymns will automatically follow. For an act to be authentic, one has to be a vital part of Africa and its thinking, part of all that popular energy mobilized for the liberation, progress, and happiness of Africa. Outside this single struggle, there is no place for either the artist or the intellectual who is not committed and totally mobilized with the people in the great fight waged by Africa and suffering humanity. Sekou Touré, I believe I pronounced that name. Each generation must discover its mission, fulfill it or betray it, in relative opacity, and the underdeveloped countries' preceding generations have simultaneously resisted the insidious agenda of colonialism and paved the way for the emergence of the current struggles. Now that we are in the heat of combat, we must shed the habit of decrying the efforts of our forefathers or feigning, thank you, or feigning incomprehension at their silence or passiveness. They fought as best they could with the weapons they possessed at the time, and if their struggle did not reverberate throughout the international arena, the reason should be attributed not so much to a lack of heroism, but to a fundamentally different international situation. More than one colonized subject had to say, "We've had enough." More than one tribe had to rebel. More than one peasant revolt had to be quelled. More than one demonstration had to be repressed. For us today to stand firm, certain of our victory. For us who are determined to break the back of colonialism, our historic mission is to authorize every revolt, every desperate act, and every attack aborted or drowned in blood. In this chapter, we shall analyze the fundamental issue of the legitimate claim to a nation. The political party that mobilizes the people, however, is little concerned with this issue of legitimacy. Political parties are connected solely with daily reality, and it is in that name of this reality, in the name of this immediacy, which influences the present and future of men and women, that they make their call to action. The political party may very well speak of the nation in emotional terms, but is primarily interested in getting the people who are listening to understand that they must join in the struggle if they want, quite simply, to exist. We now know that in the first phase of the national struggle, colonialism attempts to diffuse nationalist demands by manipulating economic doctrine. At the first signs of a dispute, colonialism feigns comprehension by acknowledging with ostentatious humanity that the territory is suffering from serious underdevelopment that requires major social and economic reforms. And it is true that certain spectacular measures, such as the opening of work sites for the unemployed here and there, delay the formation of a national consciousness by a few years. But sooner or later, colonialism realizes that it is incapable of achieving a program of socioeconomic reforms that would satisfy the aspirations of the colonized masses. Even when it comes to filling their bellies, colonialism proves to be inherently powerless. The colonial state very quickly discovers that any attempt to disarm the national parties at a purely economic level would be tantamount to practicing in the colonies what it did not want to do on its own territory. And it's no coincidence that today the doctrine of cartierism, I believe I'm pronouncing that right, is on the rise just about everywhere. Cartier's bitter disillusionment that France's stubborn determination to retain ties with people it will have to feed, whereas so many French citizens are in dire straits, reflects colonialism's inability to transform itself into a non-partisan aid program. Hence, once again, no need to waste time repeating better to go hungry with dignity than to eat one's fill in slavery. On the contrary, we must persuade ourselves that colonialism is incapable of procuring for colonized people is the material conditions likely to make them forget their quest for dignity. Once colonialism has understood where its social reform tactics would lead to, back come the old reflexes of adding police reinforcements, dispatching troops, and establishing a regime of terror better suited to its interests and its psychology. Within the political parties, or rather parallel to them, we find the cultured class of colonized intellectuals. The recognition of a national culture and its right to exist represent their favorite stamping around. Yeah. Whereas the politicians integrate their action in the present, the intellectuals place themselves in the context of history. Faced with the colonized intellectuals debunking of the colonialist theory of a pre-colonial barbarism, colonialism's response is mute. It is especially mute since the ideas put forward by the young colonized intelligentsia are widely accepted by metropolitan specialists. It is in fact now commonly recognized that for several decades, numerous European researchers have widely rehabilitated African, Mexican, and Peruvian civilizations. Some have surpassed by the passion invested by the colonized intellectuals in their defense of a national culture. But those who consider this passion exaggerated are strangely amped to forget that their psyche and their ego are conveniently safeguarded by a French or German culture whose worth has been proven and which has gone unchallenged. I believe this is the fourth page for me, correct? I think so.
Yep, page 148. So
yep.
At the end of this one, we can pass it off to Comrade Sina.
Yep. I concede the fact that the actual existence of an Aztec civilization has done little to change the diet of today's Mexican peasant. I concede that whatever proof there is of a once mighty Songhai civilization does not change the fact that the Songhais today are undernourished, illiterate, abandoned to the skies, and water with a blank mind and glazed eyes. But as we have said on several occasions, this passionate quest for a national culture prior to the colonial era can be justified by the colonized intellectuals' shared interest in stepping back and taking a hard look at the Western culture in which they risk becoming ensnared, fully aware that they are in the process of losing themselves and consequently of being lost to their people. These men work away with raging heart and furious minds to renew a contact with their people's oldest inner essence, the farthest removed from colonial times. Let us delve deeper. Perhaps this passion and this rage are nurtured or at least guided by the secret hope of discovering beyond the present wretchedness, beyond the self-hatred, this abdication and denial, some magnificent and shining era that redeems us in our own eyes and those of others. I said that I have decided to delve deeper. Since perhaps in their unconscious, the colonized intellectuals have been unable to come to loving terms with the present history of their oppressed people, since there is little to marvel at in its current state of barbarity, they have decided to go further, to delve deeper, and they must have been overjoyed to discover that the past was not branded with shame, but dignity, glory, and sobriety. Reclaiming the past does not only rehabilitate or justify the promise of a national culture, it triggers a change of fundamental importance in a colonized psycho-affective equilibrium. Perhaps it has not been sufficiently demonstrated that colonialism is not content merely to impose its law on the colonized country present and future. And that's where I'll stop.
Colonialism,
Oh, go ahead.
colonialism is not satisfied with snaring the people in its net of draining the colonized brain of any form or substance. With a kind of perverted logic, it turns its attention to the past of the colonized people and distorts it, disfigures it, and destroys it. This effort to demean history prior to colonization today takes on a dialectical significance. When we consider the resources deployed to achieve the cultural alienation so typical of the colonial period, we realize that nothing was left to chance and that the final aim of colonization was to convince the indigenous population it would save them from darkness. The result was to hammer into the heads of the indigenous population that if the colonists were to leave, they would regress into barbarism, degradation, and bestiality. At the level of the unconscious, therefore, colonialism was not seeking to be perceived by the indigenous people as a sweet, kind-hearted mother who protects her child from a hostile environment, but rather a mother who constantly prevents her basically perverse child from committing suicide or giving free rein to its malevolent instincts. The colonial mother is protecting the child from itself, from its ego, its physiology, its biology, and its ontological misfortune. In this context, there is nothing extravagant about the demands of the colonized intellectual, simply a demand for a coherent program. The colonized intellectual who wants to put his struggle on a legitimate footing, who is intent on providing proof and accepts to bare himself in order to better display the history of his body, is fated to journey deep into the very bowels of his people. This journey into the depths is not specifically national. The colonized intellectual who decides to combat these colonialist lies does so on a continental scale. The past is reversed. The culture which has been retrieved from the past to be displayed in all its splendor is not his national culture. Colonialism, little troubled by nuances, has always claimed that the N-word was a savage, not an Angolan or a Nigerian, but an N-word. For colonialism, this vast continent was a den of savages, infested with superstitions and fanaticism, destined to be despised, cursed by God, a land of cannibals, a land of N-words. Colonialism's condemnation is continental in scale. Colonialism's claim that the pre-colonial period was akin to a darkness of the human soul refers to the entire continent of Africa. The colonized endeavors to rehabilitate himself and escape the stench of colonialism obey the same rules of logic. The colonized intellectual, steeped in Western culture and set on proving the existence of his own culture, never does so in the name of Angola or Dahomey. Might be pronouncing that wrong.
Dahomey.
Dahomey. What did you say again?
Dahomey, I believe.
Dahomey. Okay. Thank you. The culture proclaimed is African culture. The black man who has never felt as much a Negro as he has under white domination decides that history imposes on him a terrain already mapped out, that history sets him along a very precise path, and that he is expected to demonstrate the existence of a Negro culture. And it is all too true that the major responsibility for this racialization of thought, or at least the way it is applied, lies with the Europeans who have never stopped placing white culture in opposition to the other non-cultures. Colonialism did not think it worth its while denying one national culture after the other. Consequently, the colonized response was immediately continental in scope. In Africa, colonized literature over the last 20 years has not been a national literature, but a Negro literature. The concept of negritude, for example, was the effective, if not logical, antithesis of that insult which the white man had leveled at the rest of humanity. This negritude, hurled against the contempt of the white man, has alone proved capable in some sectors of lifting taboos and maledictions. Because the Kenyan and Ghanaian intellectuals were above all confronted with a generalized ostracism and the syncretic contempt of the colonizer, their reaction was one of self-regard and celebration. Following the unconditional affirmation of European culture came the unconditional affirmation of African culture. Generally speaking, the bards of negritude would contrast old Europe versus young Africa, dull reason versus poetry, and stifling logic versus exuberant nature. On the one side, there stood rigidity, ceremony, protocol, and skepticism, and on the other, naivety, petulance, freedom, and indeed luxuriance.
Luxuriance.
Oh, thank you. Luxuriance, but also irresponsibility. The bards of negritude did not hesitate to reach beyond the borders of the continent. Black voices from America took up the refrain on a larger scale. The Black world came into being, and Bozia from Ghana, Virago, Diop from Senegal, Ampate Ba from Mali, and St. Clair Drake from Chicago were quick to claim common ties and identical lines of thought. This might be an appropriate time to look at the example of the Arab world. We know that most of the Arab territories came under colonial domination. Colonialism used the same tactics in these regions to inculcate, thank you, the notion that the pre-colonial history of the indigenous population had been steeped in barbarity. The struggle for national liberation was linked to a cultural phenomenon commonly known as the awakening of Islam. The passion displayed by contemporary Arab authors in reminding their people of great chapters of Arab history is in response to the lies of the occupier. The great names of Arabic literature have been reported, and the past of Arab civilization has been brandished with the same zeal and ardor. I know I'm not pronouncing that right.
No, you did. Ardor.
Oh, I did? Oh, okay.
Yep, you got this.
As that of the African civilizations. The Arab leaders have tried to revive that famous Dar el-Islam, which exerted such a shining influence in the 12th, 13th, and 14th centuries. Today, at a political level, the Arab League is a concrete example of this determination to revive the legacy of the past and carry it to a conclusion. And is that 4 pages?
49, 50, 51, 52. This one will be your last page, 152.
Oh, good. I'm glad someone's keeping count. I completely lost track already.
I'm trying over here.
Thank you so much.
You're
I'll help you
welcome.
too, don't worry.
Today, Arab physicians and poets hail each other across borders in their endeavor to launch a new Arab culture, a new Arab civilization. They join forces in the name of Arabism, just a guiding light for their thoughts. In the Arab world, however, even under colonial domination, nationalist feeling has been kept alive at an intensity unknown in Africa. As a result, the Arab League shows no sign of that spontaneous solidarity between members of the group. On the contrary, paradoxically, each member endeavors to praise the achievements of his nation. Although the cultural element has been freed from that lack of differentiation that is characteristic of the African culture, the Arabs do not always manage to forget their common identity when faced with an objective. Their actual cultural experience is not national but Arab. To plunge into the groundswell of nations, rather to pit an Arab or African culture against the universal condemnation of the colonizer. From both the Arab and African perspectives, the claims of the colonized intellectual are syncretic, continental in scope, and in the case of all of the Arabs, global. This historical obligation to racialize their claims, to emphasize an African culture rather than a national culture, leads the African intellectuals into a dead end. Let us take as an example the African Society for Culture. This society was created by African intellectuals for a mutual exchange of ideas, experiences, and research. The aim of the society was therefore to establish the existence of an African culture, to detail it nation by nation, and reveal the inner dynamism of each of the national cultures. But at the same time, the society was responding to another demand, the need to take its place within the ranks of the European Society for Culture that threatened to turn into the Universal Society. At the root of this decision, there was therefore the preoccupation with taking its place on an equal footing in the universal arena, armed with a culture sprung from the very bowels of the African continent.
And there you go.
Comrade Broad, are you ready?
Comrade Rod, you there?
I am. Okay, I'm ready to go.
Okay.
Very quickly, however, the society proved incapable of handling these assignments, and members' behavior was reduced to window dressing operations, such as proving to the Europeans that an African culture did exist and pitting themselves against the narcissism and ostentation of the European. One second. Okay. We have demonstrated that such an attitude was normal and drew its legitimacy from the lie propagated by the European intellectual. But the aims of this society were to deteriorate seriously once the concept of nigritude had been elaborated. The African Society for Culture was to become the cultural society for the Black world and was forced to include the Black diaspora, i.e., the dozens of millions of Blacks throughout the Americas. The Blacks who lived in the United States, Central, and Latin America were in fact, needed a cultural matrix to cling to. The problem they were faced with was not basically any different from that of the Africans. The whites in America had not behaved any differently to them than the white colonizers had to the Africans. We have seen how the whites were used to putting all the Negroes in the same basket. During the first Congress of the African Society for Culture in Paris in 1956, the Black Americans spontaneously considered their problems from the same standpoint as their fellow Africans. By integrating the former slaves into African civilization, the African intellectuals accorded them an acceptable civil status. But gradually, the Black Americans realized that their existential problems differed from those faced by the Africans. The only common denominator between the Blacks from Chicago and the Nigerians or Tanganyikans was that they were all defined themselves in relations to the whites. But once the initial comparisons have been made and subjective feelings have settled down, the Black Americans realized that the objective problems were fundamentally different. The principle and purpose of the freedom rides, whereby Black and white Americans endeavor to combat racial discrimination, have little in common with the heroic struggle of the Angolan people against the iniquity of Portuguese colonialism. Consequently, during the Second Congress of the African Society for Culture, the Black Americans decided to create the American Society for African Culture. Negritude thus came up against its first limitations, namely those phenomena that take into the account the historicizing of men. Negro or Negro African culture broke up because the men who set out to embody it realized that every culture is first and foremost national, and that the problems for which Richard Wright or Langston Hughes had to be on the alert were fundamentally different from those faced by Leopold Senghor or Jomo Kenyatta. Likewise, certain Arab states who had struck up the glorious hymn to an Arab Renaissance were forced to realize that their geographical position and their region's economic interdependence were more important than the revival of their past. Consequently, the Arab states today are organically linked to the Mediterranean societies and cultures. The reason being that these states are subject to modern pressures and new commercial channels, whereas the great trade routes of the days of Arab expansion have now disappeared. But above all, there is the fact that the political regimes of certain Arab states are so heterogeneous and alien to each other. I'm sorry?
Heterogeneous.
Heterogeneous, thank you.
You're welcome.
And alien to each other that any encounter, even cultural, between these states prove meaningless. It is clear, therefore, that the way the cultural problem is posed in certain colonized countries can lead to serious ambiguities. Colonials' insistence that N-words have no culture and Arabs are by nature barbaric inevitably leads to a glorification of cultural phenomena that become continental instead of national and singularly racialized. In Africa, the reasoning of the intellectual is Black African or Arab Islamic. It is not specifically national. Culture is increasingly cut off from reality. It finds safe haven in a refuge of smoldering emotions and has difficulty cutting a straightforward path that would nevertheless be only one likely to endow it with productiveness, homogeneity, and substance. Through historically limited Though historically limited, the fact remains that the actions of the colonized intellectual do much more to justify the action of the politicians. And it is true that the attitude of the colonized intellectual sometimes takes on the aspect of a cult or religion. But under closer analysis, it clearly reflects he is only too aware that he is running the risk of severing the last remaining ties with his people. This stated belief in the existence of a national culture is in fact a burning, despite return to anything. In order to secure his salvation, in order to escape the supremacy of white culture, the colonized intellectual feels the need to return to his unknown roots and lose himself, come what may, among his barbaric people, because he feels he is becoming alienated. In other words, the living focus of contradictions which risk becoming insurmountable. The colonized intellectual wretches himself from the quagmire which threatens to suck him down, and determined to believe what he finds, he accepts and ratifies it with heart and soul. He finds himself bound to answer for everything and for everyone. He is not only becomes an advocate, he accepts being included with the others, and henceforth he can afford to laugh at his past cowardice. This painful and harrowing wrench, Howard, could you just bring it one line down? I can't see where the first line. I'm reading from. This painful and harrowing wrench is, however, a necessity. Otherwise, we will be faced with extremely serious psycho-affective mutilations. Individuals without an anchorage, without borders, colorless, stateless, rootless, a body of angels. And it will come as to no surprise to hear some colonized intellectuals state, speaking as a Senegalese and a Frenchman, speaking as an Algerian and a Frenchman, stumbling over the need to assume two nationalities, two determinations, the intellectual who is Arab and French, or Nigerian and English, if he wants to be sincere with himself, chooses the negation of one of these two determinations. Is that for you?
156 is your fourth page.
Okay. Usually unwilling or unable to choose, these intellectuals collect all the historical determinations which have conditioned them and placed themselves in a thoroughly universal perspective. The reason being that the colonized intellectual has thrown himself headlong into Western culture. Like adopted children who only stop investigating their new family environment once their psyche has formed a minimum core of reassurance, the colonized intellectual will endeavor to make European culture his own. Not content with knowing Rabelais or Diderot, Shakespeare or Edgar Allan Poe, he will stretch his mind until he identifies with them completely. That's a challenge.
That's in French, so I don't fucking expect you to be able to read
I was gonna give it a go, but maybe I shouldn't.
that. I mean,
I don't know French.
if you want to try, you're welcome to.
I'll pass.
There's no translation, so I don't know what the fuck it means anyway.
Okay. In some cases, however, at the very moment where I can't see
Oh.
little
Sorry,
when
it's still
the-
showing on screen on my
I was
screen.
muted. I was
When
muted.
the-
Sorry. Oh, sorry. I
Oh.
was gonna say I think the bottom part is the translation. The lady was not alone. Where it starts there. I think like the bottom
Oh.
section. I think that might be the translation.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
All right. So I'll just read this then from that. And I guess we'll see the bottom part.
Yeah.
And okay. In some cases, however, at the very moment when the nationalist parties mobilize the people in the name of national independence, the colonized intellectual rejects his accomplishments, suddenly feeling them to be alienating. But this is easier said than done. The intellectual who has slipped into Western civilization through a cultural backdoor, who has managed to embody or rather change bodies with European civilization, will realize that the cultural model he would like to integrate for authenticities. And then at the bottom here it says, the translation is, the lady was not alone. She had a husband, a fine upstanding husband, who recited Racine and Corneille and Voltaire and Rousseau and old Hugo and the young Musset and Gide and Valéry and so many others as well. René Despartres, Face à la Nuit. Okay. For authenticity's sake, offers little in the way of figureheads capable of standing up to comparison with the many illustrious names in the civilization of the occupier. I guess I'm done here.
Okay.
Jay, it's your
History-
turn.
History, of course, written by and for Westerners, may periodically enhance the image of certain episodes of the African past. But faced with this, his country's present-day status, lucidity, and objectivity, observing the reality of the continent he would like to claim as his own. The intellectual is terrified by the vogue, the mindlessness and the savagery. Yet he feels he must escape this white culture. He must look elsewhere anywhere for lack of a cultural stimulus comparable to the glorious paranormal panorama founded by the colonizer. The colonized intellectual frequently lapses into heated arguments and develops a psychology dominated by the exaggerated sensitivity, and susceptibility. This movement of withdrawal, which first of all comes from a particular principle in the psychological mechanism and physiognomy, above all costs, mind a muscular reflex, muscular reflex. The foregoing is sufficient to explain the style of the colonized intellectual who make up their mind to exert this phase of liberating consciousness. A Jack style full of imagery for the image is the drawbridge that leads out the unconscious forces into the surrounding meadows. In an energetic style, alive with rhythms, light and harsh. This style, which Westerners once found jarring, is not, as some would have it, a racial feature, but above all, reflects a single-handed combat and reveals how necessary it is for the intellectual to inflict injury on himself, to actually bleed red blood and free himself from the part of his being already contaminated by the germs of today, of a decade. A swift, painful combat where inevitably the muscles have to replace the concept. Although this approach may take him to unusual heights in despair of poetry at an existential level, it has often proved a dead end when he decides to return to the routine of daily life. After having been roused to fever pitch by rubbing shoulders with his people, whoever they were and whoever they may be, all he brings back from his adventure are terrible, sterile cliches. He places emphasis on costume, traditions, and costumes, and his painful forced search seems but a banal quest for the exotic. This is the period when the intellectual exhort every last particular of the indigenous landscape. The following dress of the bulbul is regarded as sacred, and shoes from Paris or Italy are shun for Muslim slippers, babochis, or something like that. The language of the colonizer suddenly scooches his lips. Rediscovering one's people sometimes means, in this phase, wanting to be a N-word, not an exceptional N-word, but a real N-word, a dirty N-word, the sort defined by the white man. Rediscovering one's people means becoming a filthy Arab, of going as native as possible, becoming unrecognizable, means clipping those wings which have been left to grow. The colonizer intellectual decides to draw up a list of the bad old ways, characteristics of the colonial world, and hasten to recall the goodness of the people. This people who have been made guardians of truth. The scandal this approach triggers among the colonized strengthens the determination of the colonized. Once the colonized who had relished their victory over these assimilated intellectuals realized that these men they thought saved thought that they true save have begun to merge with the N-word scum. The entire system of uses is bearing. Every colonized intellectual won over, every colonized intellectual who confesses once he decides to revert to his old ways, not only represents a setback for the colonial enterprise, but also symbolizes the pointlessness and superficiality of the work accomplished. It's a radical work accomplished. Every colonized intellectual who crosses back over the line is a radical condemnation of the method and the regime. And the uproar it causes justifies his abdication and encourages him to persevere. If we decide to trace these various phases of development in the works of colonized writers, 3 stages emerge. First, the colonized intellectual proves he has assimilated the colonizer's culture. His works correspond point by point with those of his metropolitan counterparts. The inspiration is European, and his works can be easily linked to a well-defined trend in metropolitan literature. This is the phase of full assimilation, where we find Parnassians, symbolists, and serialists among the colonized writers. In the second stage, the colonized writer has his convictions shaken and decides to cast his mind back. This period corresponds approximately to the immersion we have just described. But since the colonized writer has not integrated with his people, since he has maintained an outside relationship to them, he is content to remember. Old childhood memories will surface. Old legends be reinterpreted on the basis of a borrowed aesthetic and a concept of the world discovered under other skies. Sometimes this pre-combat literature is steeped in humor and allegory. At other times in anguish, malaise, death, and even nausea. Yet, underneath the self-looting, the sound of laughter can be heard. Finally, a third stage, a combat stage where the colonized writer, after having tried to lose himself among people with the people, will arouse the people. Instead of letting the people let the God to prevail, he turns into a galvanizer of the people. Combat literature, revolutionary literature, national literature emerges. During this phase, a great many men and women who previously would never have thought of writing, now that they find themselves in exceptional circumstances, in prison, in the resistance, or on the eve of the execution, feel the need to proclaim their nation, to betray their people and become the spokesman of a new reality in action. Sooner or later, however, the colonized intellectual realizes that the existence of a nation is not proved by culture, but in the people's struggle against the forces of occupation. No colonialism draws its jurisdiction from the fact that the territories it occupies are culturally non-existent. Colonialism will never be put to shame by exhibiting unknown cultural treasures under its nose. The colonized intellectual, at the very moment when he undertakes a work of art, fails to realize he is using techniques and a language borrowed from the occupier. He is content to clock these instruments in a style that is meant to be national, but which is strangely reminiscent of exoticism. The colonizer intellectual who returns to his people through works of art behaves, in fact, like a foreigner. Sometimes he would not hesitate to use the local dialects to demonstrate his desire to be as closest to the people as possible. But the ideas he expresses, the preoccupations that haunt him, are in no way related to the daily lot of the men and women of his country. The culture with which intellectual is preoccupied is very often nothing but an inventory of particularisms seeking to clinch close to the people. He clings merely to a
Visible veneer.
visible veneer. This veneer, however, is merely a reflection of a dense subterranean life in perpetual renewal. This ratification, dense, no,
Which seems
which seems all too obvious and characterizes of the people, is in fact but an inert, already invalidated outcome of the many, and not always coherent adaptation of a more fundamental substance beset intellectual lets himself be mesmerized by these mummified fragments, which now consolidated signify, on the contrary, negation, obsolescence, and fabrication. Culture never has the translucency of custom. Culture eminently eludes any form of simplification. In its essence, it is very opposite of
I think you skipped a couple lines.
huh?
Did you skip a couple lines?
Did I? I don't know. My eyes just. Where else? Okay, let's go ahead. Culture imminently eludes any form of simplification. In its essence, it is the very opposite of custom, which is always a deterioration of culture. Seeking to stick to tradition or reviving neglected traditions is not only going against history or even political struggle against a merciless colonialism. Tradition changes meaning. What was a technique of passive resistance may in this phase be radically doomed. Traditions in an underdeveloped country undergoing armed struggle are fundamentally unstable and crisscrossed by centrifugal forces. This is why the intellectual often risks being out of step. The people who have waged the struggle are increasingly impenetrable to demagoguery or something like that, and by seeking to follow them too closely, the intellectual turns out to be nothing better than a vulgar opportunist, even behind the times.
Is that the end, Sister Sen?
I think, I don't know. Does it go any further? I can't erase it.
Zen, you there? I think she's doing something. I think that's the end of it for you, Che. You may have read a bit more pages, but not too much, I think. But either way, that was an amazing read. Holy shit, I love that. I want to hear what everyone has to say about what we just read. Hello? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I heard something, but Rod, if it's okay for me to ask, do you have anything to say about what we just read? Comrade Rod, you there?
Yep, yeah, I'm here.
Oh,
Well, it's a lot of psychology here,
mhm,
from the standpoint of the intellectual writer, or the person who he mentioned, the people who have to live through the colonized society, and feel like they have to speak for the people. At the same time, they themselves are in this box of colonial, as they say, the colonized intellectual, that he might exhibit certain traits of the colonizer, and
mhm.
he's kind of exposing a lot of it, a lot of the thing. But one of the parts that really had me earlier, when he mentioned how something reminded me of Puerto Rico, how the colonized people feel if the colonizer had done such a good job in in manipulating colonized people, that without him they would, starve to death, or they would revert to barbarism or something. And that's something of
Exactly.
a fear in Puerto Rico, for decades. That's all I hear, that if the U.S. leaves, the people will starve. So I
Exactly.
was
That's
able to
very
relate
good.
to
That's very good. I like that.
As well
I
as
like
the
that. That's
fact
very good.
that is very good. I also wanted to add as well, the colonizer has manipulated the colonized people so much that that um that to the colonizer there is no such thing as African culture or Arab culture or any other culture. To the colonizer, they're all the same. There is no there is no there's no distinction. It's that racist, white supremacist fucking stereotype, you know. And unfortunately, I think that's what he was talking about as well. How the colonized intellectual, how that concept of there being no such thing as a national culture or multiple cultures within Africa, that affects the colonized intellectuals' perspective on African culture, and instead of looking at it through a national lens, they look at it through a continental lens. I hope I understand it good. I hope I understood that. Sorry.
Yeah, let me say something in reference to colonialization. A lot of Latin American people, would not even acknowledge the fact that they colonized. In Puerto Rico, as an example, we the Puerto Rican people, we've been under the hammer for almost 200 years, and
Mm-hmm.
it's so many of us right now, we claim to be who we are, but yet we're not who we think we are. And that's the question. A lot of Puerto Ricans, they look at themselves as Americans, you know, uh, not knowing that in reality they're not Americans, but
Mm-hmm.
they think they're Americans, and yet they're treated as second class citizens. And I always talk with some Puerto Ricans, man. I say you consider a second class citizen by United States standards. Why are you thinking? Why are you saying you're American when you in reality you're not? So that's the situation with Puerto Rico. They've taken everything. 95% of our economy is dominated by the United States. So we
Mm-hmm.
don't have hardly anything. And a lot of Puerto
that.
Ricans say, well, we are poor people. We can't live without the United States. But that is bullshit, because a lot of profits, $50 million on a yearly basis leaves the island for the United
Yep.
States. Where's that money going? Where is it going? So if we
Mm-hmm.
poor, as they claim that we are, how is it that all this money is being pumped out, man, and going to the United States?
Exactly.
Most of all your pharmaceuticals, medications and all that, that are in pharmacies in the United States, where do they come from? They come from Puerto Rico. You know,
Yep,
a lot of people don't
exactly.
even notice. A lot of people don't even notice. But
Exactly.
I like this. I like this chapter because it talks about a colonized mentality. That's what it really talks about. A colonized mentality. And many of us Latin Americans, you know, we have a colonized mentality and don't even know it. You know, I'm going to Dominican Republic, man, this Sunday. I'm going to be there for maybe about 5 or 6 months. You know, and the thing is, I know every time I see my granddaughter, you know, because she's crazy to see me. You know, I sit down with her and I give her some insights. I tell her about Dominicans, man, because to me, the Dominican Republic is colonized. It's colonized people just as much as Puerto Rico. You know, I mean, the American dollar has a lot of value in the Dominican Republic, and yet the Dominican dollar don't mean nothing nowhere in the world. You know, so what is that? Let me let you look. Thank you for letting me speak.
That was beautiful, Rand. Oh man, I just thrown up my hand. I don't want to interrupt the conversation. I just wanted to jump in and let y'all know I'm back, and apologies for my signal drop and my phone overheated, so I had to grab my stuff for it. So I've returned. I hope y'all were still able to see the screen share long enough to finish that last paragraph.
Yeah, it was. It was, thankfully. It was.
Okay. Good shit. My bad. It's fucking hot here.
Oh yeah. But yeah, Joe was just Joe was just talking about how a lot of people within Puerto Rico and within Latin America and within the global South in general have a colonized mentality because no, yeah, it's true. You know, a lot of people think that Africa is this barren land that has nothing, but that's not true at all. Africa is the richest country in the world in resources. It has the richest amount of resources throughout the entire world. But the people of Africa have been forced to have a whitewashed colonized mentality that there's nothing in Africa. That it's just a barren wasteland, and if the colonizers were to leave, Africa would just go back to savagery and barbarity. But that's bullshit. You know, that's just racist, white supremacist, bourgeois thought bullshit that's instilled and embedded into colonized people to prevent them from engaging in the struggle, to prevent them from building solidarity with one another and engaging in class struggle and building up the revolution. Because the thing that the colonizer and the thing that the bourgeois fear the most is a conscious worker. That's the thing they fear the most. You know, it's when the people become conscious of their position within class struggle. You know, and yeah, it's very interesting.
Well,
Yeah, I thought it was a very good chapter in reference to what we talked about. And Gary, I believe you're also are you Cuban American?
I am Cuban. I was born.
Oh, you was born
in Cuba.
Okay.
Yeah, I was born in Cuba.
Right. That the pre-revolutionary Cuba would be a perfect example of what this chapter highlighted. Cuba went through this. It's easy to see a hindsight now, being a progressive nation and all, but it was really one of the most manipulated Caribbean countries.
Yeah.
I would say along the lines of Puerto Rico, Puerto Rico really went through a lot more, like in terms of horrendous management during the early years of colonization, but at least Cuba had some kind of like grip on their own nation in the beginning, even though the Platt Amendment rendered it pretty much a colony or a new form of colony, as what they called it later.
It was
colonialism.
Cuba Cuba, just like Puerto Rico, has a long history with colonialism. With first being a Spanish colony and then being an American colony. So yeah, that's a pretty good example. Pre-revolutionary Cuba versus Cuba during the Cuban Revolution. Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Right, right.
But yeah, to the colonizer, there is no distinct cultures within the global South. To them, they're all the same. To them, they're all savages, quote unquote. But that's not true. In Africa, there are multiple cultures. There are multiple ethnic groups. Each one with their own cultures, traditions, histories, and so on and so forth. And in pre-colonial times, each culture, each nation had their own socioeconomic system, their own superstructure, mode of production, relation of production, social relations, and so on and so forth, based on their geological, materialistic conditions, and based on their socioeconomic system. There were multiple different socioeconomic systems and different superstructures within Africa during pre-colonial times. So this mentality that there was nothing but before the colonizers came is bullshit. It's cultural erasure, it's cultural genocide, and it's just trying to subjugate, oppress, and exploit the masses by psychologically instilling in them internalized racism and a bourgeois way of thinking.
Let me go again on this one, man. There's two systems. You got neocolonialism and you have colonialism. Now, Puerto Rico is colonialism. Why? Because it's directly controlled by the United States in all aspects of life. Now you have other countries that are not colonized, but are neo-colonized, which means that the system, the ruling class, doesn't have to directly control them. They control them indirectly. And that's neo-colonialism. Dominican Republic is a good example. Now, when you take a colony, whether neo or colonial, and you take a colony and and let's say, for instance, you ask them, could you trade with Cuba? Could you establish an economic relationship with Cuba? If they was to do that, what do you think the United States would do? They would attack immediately. Let's say Dominican Republic, they would attack them. They would not allow Dominican Republic to have no type of relationship with Cuba. And that is neocolonialism.
Yeah. Neocolonialism subjugates the people of the global South through food aid, gaslighting, and the creation of a comprador class, while colonialism is far more direct. It's kind of like, colonialism, as an example, colonialism is kind of like your stereotypical bully. The bully that steals your lunch money, the bully that picks on you for wearing glasses or whatever. While neocolonialism is the bully that psychologically manipulates you into trusting him, when in actuality he's just using you, as an example.
Yeah.
And I really love this chapter, man. It's so good. It's sad that we couldn't get Captain Africa on here, man. It's a shame. I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, I like during the last, because I go to UPM educational courses. I'm pretty sure when I mentioned that I was hosting this book club, he or Chairman Zulu, either one, I'm pretty sure it was Captain Africa though. He said that he was going to try and join the book club. I hope he's able to join next time, because his insight on this would be amazing.
Agree.
You know, I spoke to Sally earlier, and
Sally Mae?
Sally. I spoke to Sally earlier, and I was under the impression, you know, because she said the reason why she wasn't at the meeting yesterday was because she something came about, and she had to attend to it. You know, she had to do a favor for somebody. But I said, okay, that's good. You know, today you could go today. Is there any problem with that? And she never responded to that. She never, you know, so I don't know. I just hope she's okay. She's not going through some changes. Because they
I hope she's okay too.
released that thing from her feet now. They took that thing off.
They took what off?
She has something that you could only go but so far before it rains and something like that.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking
Brace
about. Like,
ankle? A brace ankle?
yeah, yeah.
Well, they took it out. They took it off. I think it either was yesterday or they took it off today, but they took it off. You know, so she doesn't have to attend to that bullshit no more.
That's good.
But other than that, I don't know. I'll just have to find out what's happening.
Well, if she just had surgery, she might just need some time to rest up and, you know, let her foot heal.
Yeah, that may be true too.
I don't know. I don't know anything about Sally's situation, so this ankle bracelet thing is new to me.
Oh,
Wait, what?
the bracelet got taken off. I heard you wrong. I thought you meant she had like surgery on her foot to take care of an issue. Never mind.
Yeah, yeah. I was confused for there for a second.
I only heard part of it because I was refilling my water, and it sounded like you meant like she had surgery to. Never mind. Yeah.
Shay, if you don't mind me, Shay, if you don't mind me asking, what kind of situation is Sally in?
I
If
don't
you
think
know.
that's appropriate to discuss on
Yeah,
a
yeah,
stream.
yeah.
So
Right. Sorry.
how about we talk about the book?
Yeah. Sorry, just worried about Sally. I just hope she's okay and all.
Oh, I know, just this is public forum.
But anyway, Zena, you haven't said. I would like to hear what you have to say.
It's definitely thought-provoking.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you think a lot more, I guess, about that of the colonized in detail, because personally, obviously, like personally not one of those colonized, not really. So it's nice to kind of get a detailed perspective on even the stages like people go through and like people are really thinking, and I guess ways out of that thinking that would be productive and help really bring an end to colonialism, you know?
Sorry, I was eating. Sorry, I'm sorry, but no, yeah. Well, per se, you know, as someone who is not colonized and as a white person, it's very interesting and very insightful to to gain to have a perspective of what colonized people have to go through in the global south and the global south and the different stages that colonized that colonized that colonized intellectuals go through when it comes to radicalizing and when it comes to being a part of the masses and connecting with them and struggling alongside them. It's very interesting.
Like, I'm just hoping that things change. Like, the ideas are definitely out there. I just really hope things change. It would definitely be nice. Not gonna lie, when we're done reading this book, I might read it again. Like, it's a really good book. I hope more people read it.
I hope more people read it too. Honestly, and yeah, I'm definitely going to read it again. I tend to understand books better when I reread them, you know? So I might reread this as well. And if you would like, and if you would like it, if you don't mind, we could reread it together.
That'd be fun.
Oh yeah. Sister Zen, do you have any thoughts on this book and what you heard before you had to go? Oh, is she? Oh, I thought Zen left.
No, just, I'll be back in a few minutes. I'm juggling a few things over here.
Gotcha. Mm.
Mm.
But anyway, Shay, do you have any more thoughts on the book?
Yeah, the only thing about Fanon is that he uses a lot of words that it just
Yeah.
totally off context, man. You know, it makes me wonder. But hey, you know, I think you just got to read it, you know, and try to decipher what he's trying to say. You
Yep.
know,
He's like Marx.
yeah, he
He's
like
Marx.
Marx, man. You
Uses a
know,
lot of big words. You gotta learn how to decipher it. But when
I
you
know,
understand,
I know. But you know something, you know, like Guame the other day was saying something about, you know, when you study Marxism, you have to study it, man, individually, man, you know. And that's what I've been doing, man, throughout the years, man. I've been studying Marxism, you know, individually. I just take a book, man. Anything Marx I take and I read it. Then if I can't understand, I read it again. And I keep reading it until I start grasping, you know, little bits of it, you know, because Marx would be very, very complicated, man. But you know something, we look at Marx as the main person, but Engels, you know, and I was gonna use a word, but I'm not gonna use the street word. But Engels was also
very
up there.
prominent.
You know, he was
Yeah.
up there, man. I mean, he wrote this book, Dialectics of Nature. You know, I don't know if anybody's heard of it, Dialectics of
I never
Nature.
heard of that book of his. Never heard of it.
Man, this book is something, man, because he goes into talking about nature, you know, and he talks about nature and the body. He says that death when somebody dies, that's not something that is spontaneous. That's something that is a process that develops. You know, like your body's continuously changing, and yet you are not the same person who you was 5 minutes ago. You know, that's dialectics, man, you know. And so I read dialectics of nature because it helps me understand things, man. You know, and he also wrote a book that a lot of people don't even know. The book is Capital. Let me see. Yeah, Labor and its relationship to man and its relationship from monkey to man. Have you ever heard of that?
I have never heard of that book from him. The only books that I know from Engels are, I believe he wrote, what was that one book that he wrote? He wrote, The Origins of the Family, State, and Private Property. He wrote the principles. He wrote the principles of communism, and he wrote Socialism, Utopia, and something else.
Yeah. Well, you see, Engels, man, he wrote a lot of things because in actuality, you know, when Marx died, Marx didn't complete all his books.
Yep.
You know, so Engels has to pick up on his work and follow up on it. And I'm glad, man, that Lenin came along and he took it and he advanced it. You know what I'm saying? You
and
know,
then Mao, and then Huey.
Yeah. And who?
And then Huey.
Yeah, you right. So, you know, I don't know, man. You know, people talk about Marxism, man. You know, I've been in podcasts, man, where people talk about Marxism. They say, oh, man, that's a white man's theory. But do you know, man, that Marx, you know, and I just found out there's a book out that's the Marx Margin. I don't know if you heard of it, the Marx Margin. I've been reading that too. And he talks about Asians. This is Marx. He talks about Asians. He talks about Black people in his country, you know, and a lot of Black people in this country, they say that Marx has never talked about them. And he does. Marx has talked about Asian people. He has talked about Chinese people. He has talked about African people, you know, and he talked about various parts of Latin America, and it amazed me to even to see that. Wow, you know, I never knew, man, that Marx was you know, like he was involved in this, man, because I always thought, man, Marx was just coming from the perspective of Germany, you know, it was coming from the perspective of England and London and all that, but the further you read and the further you explore, you come up with a lot of things that you never knew before. And that's
very interesting. I'm gonna read that book, but the thing about dialectics is that dialectics is universal. You know, it applies to all our materialistic conditions. You know, it's a science.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. But you know, when he talked, you know, and that's, you know, he said that the cells in your body, how you're constantly changing. You know, we get old, right? We get old, but actually we was young at one point. Now we old.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, I'm old. Let me look at I'm old. You know, there was a time in my life where I was young, and there was a time in my life that I didn't look the way I look now. You see what I'm saying? So when you look at it in the context of dialectics, that's dialectical materialism. You know,
yep, our bodies are constantly
when
changing.
When you look at contradiction, everything in life it has a contradiction. You know, death and life, death and
Growth and decay.
Yeah, it has contradiction. And what moves things forward in life is contradictions. You know, even and nature is full of contradictions. Nature is full of it, and we are part of nature. You know, the only time that we're not part of nature is when we're in labor, when we're working, we alienate ourselves from nature. You know, but we always return to nature because nature is we are part of nature. Nature is part of us. You know. But anyway, that's my study.
Oh yeah, this is a very interesting book, man. I always love these discussions that we have, man. I always enjoy these discussions. Oh boy, this is. Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait until we finish this book and we end up reading more, man. I can't wait. I can't wait. I have so many plans for different book clubs that we're gonna have. I'm super excited.
I'm in the process of organizing. You know, we're going to call it the Attica Guidance Society, and it's going to be about helping people who need help without even talking about no money, man. We're just going to help people. We got one of our Attica brothers currently who is blind, totally blind. And one of our Attica brothers always go to his house and takes him and walks him in the streets and take him.
That's nice.
You know, because they're both Attica brothers. So he takes them to the streets and it takes them to a restaurant and then it brings him right back to his shelter, you know. And so he was talking with me and I said, listen, we're gonna build an organization. It's called the Attica Guidance Society, you know.
Ooh.
And we're gonna build that up, man, you know, and a lot we got 3 people so far involved in that organization. And all we do is just help people who need help without even asking for any money. We don't need the money. We just need to get involved and help people. And through that, we're gonna develop also the Attica Foundation.
Hell yeah.
So
that's cool as fuck.
You know, that's what I'm doing in around you know, a lot. I'm doing that a lot now. You know, I can't move. They want to make me president, but I don't want to be president. you know, because sometimes, man, you know, when you president, you think you hot shit, and you ain't, you know. As a human being, man, you know, you that shit just plays with you, man. And I don't want none of that shit in my thoughts, man. I just want to help people. You know, that's basically it. You know,
I feel you.
And if there's any money that's going to come, it's going to come from donations, not going to come from the people what we help. You know,
Oh
so
yeah.
that's one of the things that I'm going to do, man. Go ahead, brother Joe.
No, I just wanted to give you a thumbs up on that because sometimes when we get into leadership and some individuals, it gets to their head and they think they're King Taco when we're all in the struggle. We're all in the same struggle together. So
I know.
There is no hierarchy. There is no hierarchy. We're all in the struggle together.
yeah, that's why I always say we don't need nobody walking in front of us. We don't need no one walking behind us. We need to be walking shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I
Exactly.
came in late. I didn't get to join the reading today, but what I seen a comment from Comrades in, and it's like it starts at 5 p.m. and I thought she was talking about Pacific Standard Time, and I was like, oh man, it got me all messed up. But anyway, I was able to enjoy the conversation and look forward to next week's reading. That's all I had to say.
Nice.
Well, you know, brother Joe, that you know, even though you may have missed the book reading, but you know, after the book reading, you know how we get. We start talking about all kinds of stuff.
Yep. Well, it's talking about a
You know,
bunch of stuff.
and sometimes a lot of the stuff we be talking about is more about it than what we read.
Yeah, most definitely. And one other thing, I heard you said you're going to go to out of the country
Dominican Republic.
Yeah, I'm going to the
Dominican, the
I'm
DR.
I'm going to the Dominican Republic Sunday.
Does that mean we're going to lose reception? You got reception over there, comrade?
I don't know, man. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't, man. You know, that's how that goes, man. Dominican Republic is very is what is that, neo-colonized to the point, man, that you know, yeah, there's been times, man, where I've been talking to my comrades, man, on the computer, and all of a sudden it goes off. You know,
Okay.
and the thing is about neo-colonialism in the Dominican Republic, that if you want to pay for you got to pay a certain amount of money in order to be able to talk on the phone with people outside of the country. So it may cost like 50 pesos or it may cost 100 pesos, you know, but 50 pesos may not mean anything to us, but it means something to them in the Dominican Republic. You know what I'm saying? And so,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, 100 pesos don't mean nothing. That's $10. That's like $10.
Right.
But over there, 100 pesos is a lot of money.
Right.
You know, so I don't know. The Zydeco brothers telling me, man, listen, we need to stay in contact with each other. I said, yeah, I know. You know, we'll do the best we can. And I think that we're gonna try to do it to Wi-Fi.
Okay.
You know, we're gonna do it to Wi-Fi and see how that goes, man. You know.
All right. Well, just in case we don't get or you don't have reception out there, stay strong, comrade, and enjoy your time with your family.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I know. I'm gonna do a little fishing and drink a little tequila.
Comrade,
drink some tequila, man. You know what I'm saying?
Comrade Che, it's a similar thing in Cuba as well, where you have to pay a certain number in order to talk to someone outside of the country. You know, and it can range from how much it costs. You know.
That's right. It could drain your pockets too.
Yep.
You know, because the money. You know, I mean, it's robbery, man. Robbery in the first degree, man. That's how I see it. You know, you go shopping in the Dominican Republic, man. And a bag of potatoes, man, may cost like $50,000. I'm just exaggerating a little bit, but like 50. It costs like $100, 150 pesos. You know, and pesos, man. to them, it's nothing, man. And even though it's nothing to them, it is something to them because a lot of them don't even have that much money. You know, works over there are very scarce, man. You know, you can't hardly find work. You know, most of the women that work over there, they do house cleaning in hotels. That's what they do. You know, but they get paid. They get paid. You know how much? Once a month. Once a month. Once a month they get paid. It's just ridiculous, man. It's you know, there was an election, man, a few years ago when I was in Dominican, and the people who was running for president, he happened to go in the neighborhood when I was, you know, in the Republic, and so I went and talked to him. I said, man, why who are you? He said, I'm getting ready to run. You know, have people running, man, to elect me president. I said, yeah, what you gonna steal? You gonna steal from people like everybody else is doing? He said, who are you? I said, don't worry about who I am. I know who you are.
I bet you scared him. I bet you scared him.
And I said, well, you know, he started looking around to see if there was any police, man, you know, and there were police, you know, so I noticed that his moves, so I just stopped. Because you can't talk politics around politicians because they think you know, all of a sudden they say you're a communist, you know, and to label me a communist in Dominican Republic, that's jail time automatically. You know, jail time. You go to jail just for saying what you believe in. If you believe in their bullshit, then you're okay. But if you don't believe in their bullshit, you're in trouble.
Yep.
It's some serious police kind of bullshit where they're gonna make it illegal for you to hold a specific economic stance. What the fuck?
America moment.
They clearly don't fucking understand communism. Either that or they feel like so threatened in their fucking profit margins about it to be salty. Because, like, how the fuck do you make it illegal for someone to hold a specific set of values as far as how our economic system should be handled, so that it actually benefits the masses and not just a fucking small handful of greedy motherfuckers?
Yep.
That's fucked.
Sister Zen, I really want to hear your opinion on this chapter because I know you have some very interesting things to say, and we haven't heard from you yet.
Okay, right on. Honestly, I see this as building on a lot of the things that he's already discussed, but going into deeper detail as far as like the way that, okay, like the psychology of colonization we've discussed in previous parts, really gets into the nitty-gritty of how you live your life and starts affecting how you interact with or even perceive your own culture. And how that applies. And this is part of that domino effect of seeing the mind fuck from being colonized start to affect how you even identify, what you identify with when it comes to your culture. Of is it national? Is it the entire ethnicity, the entire continent, the whole fucking 9 yards? And having to have these massive internal struggles on top of the external you're already having to deal with, as far as even like coping with those aspects of your entire fucking world and existence having been colonized. And it really shows just how deep the psychological effects he was speaking about in previous chapters really takes an impact on how many fucking levels it takes an impact. Because this, as he was stating, it's literally affecting people's connection to self. By proxy of that lack of community after having been colonized, you know, that there is this disparity amongst the community where people who have become neo-colonialists are harming themselves in those manners of separating themselves from their own culture and history, and instead buying into the ideology of the colonizers. And the others who are like, wait, no, we like who we are. We would like to hang on to this. Our culture is beautiful. Are then deemed quote unquote savages. And it's no fucking different than what the colonizers did here to indigenous people. It's the same fucking line of thinking. It's the same fucked ideology that has caused tears in people's communities, because then there's this division, this separation between them, because once again, even referring back to, I think it was in chapter 2 where he was talking about the neo-colonized relating more with the colonizers due to even their adjacency to capital under the new system, that they were able to profit from and benefit from their relationship to the colonizers.
Labor aristocracy, I believe.
At odds with the other people from the communities they came from, who wanted to, you know, economically hang on to like how they operated. And now we're seeing that same type of effect psychologically, as far as like staying connected to who you are. You know, this is another facet of that same concept. And it all comes down to, are you going to allow yourself to be neo-colonialist and put the fucking gun to your head for the colonizers so they don't have to hold the gun there? Or are you going to recognize that both you and the rest of the people of your community who have been deemed quote unquote fucking savages and barbaric, which was nothing but racist bullshit from the fucking start to try to dehumanize people? It was never credible. It was just a fucking claim of white supremacy and manifest destiny bullshit. And they're still imposing these fucking ideologies on people who are refusing to become neo-colonialist and put the gun to their own fucking head. And they're doing it in every fucking manner of your existence, which really drilled home with, you know, speaking specifically to the existential crisis happening here within people, because they have been so driven apart. And, you know, the ones who have become neo-colonial being driven from what it is that inherently makes them and their culture what it is, and being told, well, no, that's bad. Coming over here and being basically a wage slave for the people who colonize your fucking country, this is good. And it's the same mind fuck we see here, where horrible shit gets rewarded, and trying to show any facet of yourself that is outside of this very narrow window of like basically you exist to produce capital. Anything outside of that that isn't producing capital is treated as needless, as, you know, basically a threat to, but what are you doing for the system? And therefore it tries to destroy any and all connection with who we are and how we exist. All the way down to keeping us so fucking busy we can't even connect with nature. We don't have enough time to connect with each other. If all of you have the energy to do in a day is work 10 to 16 hour fucking shifts, and, you know, barely even get a break to fucking eat, let alone have any time to do anything, because by the time you get out of fucking work, you're exhausted. You barely got enough energy to feed yourself before you pass out to wake the fuck up and do it all over again. So when you work, when you live to work instead of working to live, then you're separated from any and all fucking connection. And at that point, it's when we get to like right now where capitalism is completely fucking eating itself, because it's absolutely destroying those which it fucking depends on to keep going. And that's labor. Like these bourgeoisie motherfuckers ain't doing enough fucking pencils. They are not the labor that keeps the shit going. We are. And so we can see that progression from when Frantz Fanon wrote this book decades ago, of the development of where those ideologies have gone, what they have led to there and here. And we're seeing what Marx predicted even further back of eventually this system is going to become self-consuming, and it's going to leave us with no choice but to dismantle it and replace it with something else. And Once again, to harken back to one of my favorite authors ever, Bell Hooks, and her description of this system is white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. And to harken to the words of Chairman Fred of, this is not a race war, this is a class war. We have to maintain sight of that if we are going to actually fix the shit that is affecting all of us, including those who we have had to stand against ideologically because they have become neo-colonized, we have to, awaken them. We have to educate them and bring them back in the fold, because it is only together with our strong numbers that we are going to actually be able to address capitalism and its class system, but everything which upholds it, from racism to sexism, homophobia, the whole fucking 9 yards, the whole spiel of bigotry. We have to end these fucking things if we are going to move forward.
Yep.
And that means actually fucking decolonizing our goddamn minds.
Yep.
I'm thankful for authors like Frantz Fanon and his insight, because you got to keep in mind too that he was a sociologist, and I believe he had degrees in psychology too. I'd have to look it up, but
I'm pretty sure
really
he's a
showing
doctor.
us-
Yeah, he was
Yes,
a doctor.
he was a doctor.
Yeah.
I just can't remember what all doctorate degrees that he
I
had
think
right
he was
now.
a psychologist. He was a psychologist.
Okay, thank you for confirming that. I thought so, but I got Swiss cheese
Yeah, he
memory.
was a psychologist.
But yeah, he's literally showing us not only those effects of how colonization has fucking traumatized people on the mass scale, but also the tools by which to heal ourselves and be able to fucking correct the situation. And it's
Yep.
beautiful. That's my rant.
That was awesome. That was awesome, sisters. And I fucking loved everything that you said, because all that shit about them being savages and fucking and having barbaric behavior, all of that is just racist white supremacist bullshit in order to embolden and bolster white supremacist groups to colonize, subjugate, exploit, and siphon the resources and surplus value of these people. It's only just to justify imperialism and white supremacy by fucking portraying them as not being human at all, to demonize them, dehumanize them, and to subjugate them, exploit them, and oppress them in order to maximize as much profit as possible. That's it. And we see, and as you said, we see those fucking effects on how people how to identify and who they are, and they have to go through this whole clusterfuck of trying to see what their culture is, whether it's on a national level, a continental level, a global level, like he was talking, and how due to being colonized psychologically and being whitewashed, a lot of these people have internalized racism and feel bad and don't even believe they have a culture due to that whitewashed cultural erasure bullshit and genocide and fucking manifest destiny and all the fucking 9 yards, and him talking about this, about national culture, it just emphasizes how cultural revolution is even more important. It's kind of emphasizes just how essential one's culture is to the revolution, because as he said, national liberation doesn't just come from speaking on some foreign culture that no one knows about. It comes from armed struggle. It comes from struggling and engaging in a revolution against the colonizer, against the occupier, and culture can be used within revolution by radicalizing the people, and it's just beautiful as fuck. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Speaking of subjugation and stuff like that, when the invaders invaded Puerto Rico, in 1898, they immediately began subjugating people to all kinds of things. One of the things that they made us realize, they made us see, was that we were powerless without them.
Yep.
And that a lot of Puerto Ricans right today, they feel that the United States is the most powerful country in the world, and that if we was to wage any war against it, we would lose. And so they subject themselves to the fact that, well, being that we can't beat them, we're going to join them. And that's what has happened for a lot of Puerto Ricans. I mean, when you look at the Puerto Rican Day Parade, it's ridiculous. It's really ridiculous. I mean, okay, you're waving the Puerto Rican flag and all that, but that's the only day that you raise the Puerto Rican flag. That's the only day that you really could honestly say you Puerto Rican, because every other day, man, you think you're something else.
Mhm.
And that's subjugation, man. That's the subjugation of our people.
Yep. Psychologically, economically, socially, and culturally,
Yeah.
the United States at the end of the day is a paper tiger, on the surface it looks threatening, but it's paper. It can rip easily, The moment any country, the moment any nation puts any actual pressure on the United States, they fucking flee. They go back. They fucking rely on other nations to fucking help them, like shit. People genuinely believe that the U.S. has never lost a single war. That's bullshit. The United States has lost multiple wars. Like, people don't know. Like, people really need to learn about what was those 4 wars that were lost by the United States? What were they again?
Iraq?
The Gala Wars. The Gala Wars.
Gala?
People don't know. Yeah, people don't know about the Gala Wars and how on 3 occasions the United States lost to the Gala people, or the Vietnam War, or the Korean War, and so on and so forth. There have been multiple wars that the United States has lost. They're a paper tiger. They're threatening in appearance alone. But when the people unite, and when they struggle alongside one another, and when they apply the correct ideological and political line to combat the forces of reaction, the U.S. fucking resorts to cowardice and fucking and cheap attacks in order to win.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's
Sorry, the yelps going around the room reminded me of King of the Hill, like everybody's standing in front of the fence with a beer. Yep.
Yep. Man. Oh, by the way, Sister Zen, how long have we been this reading?
We are at 1 hour and 45 minutes, so we should wrap it up soon.
Yeah,
But this has been a dope discussion.
that's been a dope discussion as hell. I love it. I absolutely love it. Does anyone have anything else to say? Anything at all?
Well,
Hey,
I
does
say
anyone
like,
sorry.
like the young laws say, pa'lante, forward, let's move forward.
Hell yeah. Constantly moving
Palante.
forward and advancing class struggle. Hell yeah.
All power
Well,
to
Enjoy your time, Shay.
oh hell yeah.
Well,
Oh yeah,
this
and
is
say
this is a Sunday. Sundays when I'm leaving Saturday afternoon. I'm leaving towards New York. I got about 7 hours to get to New York, and then I'm gonna sleep in a hotel somewhere in White Plains, New York, and then wake up in the morning, Sunday morning, and shoot over to John F. Kennedy. I have to be there by 12 o'clock, to for all the luggage and all that bullshit that they do, and then I'll be on the plane. I'll be on the plane like 2:30.
hell yeah.
And
That's
in
awesome.
3 hours, I'll be in Dominican Republic. Man, I'm gonna feel good.
Oh, yeah, that'll be nice, especially getting to stay down there for 6 months. That's what the fuck sounds.
Yeah, well, I ain't got no other choice than to stay there. I may stay there longer, man. There's a lot of reasons. I don't want to talk about it right here, but there's a lot of reasons why my wife is sending me over there to the Dominican Republic. She wants me to stay over there, you know. So I gotta do what I gotta do, man. You know.
Who would want to stay here?
Yeah, I don't really. I don't. You know, I mean, but she, you know, you know, she works from 11 o'clock, from 11:30 in the morning to 11 o'clock at night. She works. She's a hard worker. You know, so you know, she doesn't feel. She feels, man, that if I stay here by myself, something's gonna probably happen to me, and she gonna feel guilty for it. You know, so in order to avoid that, you know, and I said, listen, I'm not that old. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, trust me, Trey. You saw it fighting you. You saw it fighting you.
Yeah, yeah. So she want to protect me, man, from any possibilities. So it's okay,
Aw.
man. You know, send me. I don't give a fuck.
That's
Well, I mean,
nice.
it's looking out for your health in multiple manners. You'll get to spend some time with family that, you know, you
I
probably
know,
like.
I know, I know, I know.
Beautiful.
Like I said, I'm going over there. I got some tequila right here. I'm gonna put it in the suitcase as soon as I get over there. You see, the funny thing is that over there, you know, there's no, you know, you could be in the car on your way anywhere, and you could drink, and nobody stop. The police won't even stop you.
Wow.
As long as you're a passenger, that should be perfectly fine. It's just, you know, you shouldn't be driving fucked up. But
Well, my son, my
drink.
my stepson, man, he's a good driver. He's gonna be picking me up, and he drinks a lot of beer. You know, so he drinks when he driving, man. He drinking his beer. You know, and I mean, there's been times where the police, we pass the police, they don't even say that. We can walk down the street and drink whatever we want to drink. You know, so I said, wow, man, yeah,
Well, I
that's
mean,
that's what you call your colonialism.
well, I don't see anything wrong with being able to walk down the street with an open drink too. I find that kind of weird and puritanical that there's so many places here that don't allow that. You know, and as far as drinking and driving, you know, most people can drive perfectly fine after a couple of drinks. It's like if you're shit faced, then yeah, you're a danger to yourself and others. But it's kind of different. I didn't know they didn't care if you were drinking and driving. Like they're, you know, I figured you meant like for passengers, but hey, fuck it.
I
It's
mean,
one less.
I hear what you're saying, and it's logical what you're saying. You know, I mean, you know, you shouldn't be drinking and driving. You know, I mean, it's logical. But hey, you know, like you know, my stepson, well, my stepson, yeah, he feel, you know, he's been doing that, man, for years, and he's 45 years old, and so he feels that ain't not gonna happen to him, you know. But it's always a possibility that people do make mistakes at least once.
Right. I don't know. I can say like, I mean, I don't do it anymore because I drive a house on wheels and that's a little extra to, you know, drive around while drinking. But, you know, back in the day, I used to drink and drive all the time and never had any problems. I have almost been killed by a drunk driver. I was a passenger in that accident, though. That ain't on me. But, you know, there's a lot of people who are perfectly capable of driving just fine and safely while under the influence. It does depend, you know, on if it's somebody who's going to like maintain or if they're going to get completely annihilated where they can't straight. Therein lies a world of difference, you know. So I think a lot of the rules that we have here around that are pretty fucked up levels of authoritarianism, you know, of like where they set the blood alcohol content levels for, you know, where you're safe to drive or not, you know, like it really don't take much to get your blood alcohol content up to where you'd be over the limit. And I know a lot of people who are still perfectly fine driving at that point, you know, it's just weird.
Oh yeah. Also, I probably think it's best that we wrap up the call, just in case it doesn't end up being too long.
Yeah, especially when we're wandering off subject anyhow.
Yep.
All right, I'll cut
everyone,
the recording, but if you want, I can leave the room open so everybody can still hang out.
hell yeah. Well, as
Yeah.
always, all power to the people, everyone. All power.
Oh, power.
All power.
All power.
Oh, power,
All
people.
power.
All power, comrades.
Power to the people.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We will see you back here next week for the other half of Chapter 4 of Wretched of the Earth. And if you'd like to tune in to the Second Rainbow Coalition readings too, then we will be doing the next one of those on Friday. Reading
Oh,
the New Era
yeah.
Young Lords book, or the Young Lords book. Yeah. All right.